or it's already in the room. What God has been showing in the secret place is now manifesting in plain sight. We are living in a time when discernment is not optional. We must awaken not just to the noise, but to the silence. Because what the enemy has planned isn't coming with horns and alarms. It's coming quietly, subtly, even fashionably. But hear me, just because it's common doesn't mean it's consecrated. Just because it's accepted doesn't mean it's aligned with heaven. Some of you have been feeling that nudge in your spirit, that sense that something isn't right. That's not paranoia, that's prophecy. And we must be aware the hour is too late for casual faith, too dangerous for diluted discernment. Many will accept the mark, not because they are evil, but because they are asleep. But God is waking his remnant. He's sounding the alarm in your spirit, not to scare you, but to prepare you. You are not here by accident. You are here because the kingdom is raising a standard. And that standard is you. So today, I'm not here to give you fear. I'm here to stir your fire. I'm here to awaken what's been dormant. Because, child of God, it has begun in secret, but when it shows itself in the open, may it not find you unaware. May it not find you unequipped. Let's lean into this together. Heaven is speaking. There's something happening in the spirit realm that the natural eye can't fully perceive unless it's trained, unless it's sharp, unless it's submitted to God's voice. The enemy isn't showing up in red horns and a pitchfork. He's showing up in scrolls, trends, screens, policies, hashtags, and products. And the most dangerous tactic he's using right now is desensitization. Desensitization doesn't announce itself. It works slowly. It works through repetition. It works by normalizing what was once outrageous. What was once shocking becomes entertainment. What was once offensive becomes funny. What was once sacred becomes optional. You don't realize you're being numbed until you no longer feel the weight of what you're watching, the heaviness of what you're agreeing to, the shift in your spiritual sensitivity. The enemy knows he can't remove your calling, but if he can dull your convictions, then he can get you to participate in your own spiritual decline. This is not about fear, it's about focus. The world is turning up the volume, and if you're not intentional, the noise will drown out the still small voice of the Holy Spirit. Satan isn't just trying to deceive you. He's trying to familiarize you with deception until it feels like truth. We've been trained to laugh at darkness, to binge on dysfunction, to dress up compromise as creativity. There's a constant feed, 24/7, of ideas, lifestyles, and narratives being delivered to our minds. And many believers are scrolling through portals they wouldn't dare walk through in the physical. But in the digital space, it feels harmless. It feels passive. That's the deception. The devil knows if he can get you to keep watching, he won't need to keep whispering. Because now you've programmed your mind to accept what you used to reject. Desensitization is subtle warfare. It's not loud. It's consistent. The goal is not to convince you overnight, but to slowly lower the standard until there is no standard left. What you used to pray against, you now tolerate. What used to break your heart now barely grabs your attention. And slowly, without even knowing it, you've moved. Your convictions have faded. Your appetite has changed. And this is where the mark begins. Not on the hand, but in the heart. Before it is physical, it is always psychological. It's a belief system before it becomes a behavior. That's why God is calling his people back to holiness, back to clarity, back to a sharpness in spirit. You don't need to see demons to know warfare is real. Just look at how comfortable sin has become. Look at how numb the church is to compromise. Look at how many have exchanged intimacy with God for influence with the world. It's not that they plan to walk away. They were just slowly led astray, inch by inch, click by click, post by post. And now they can't hear him like they used to. The devil's greatest disguise is not violence, it's comfort, it's trend, it's silence, it's normalcy. That's how he moves, that's how he enters, not with panic, with patterns. Repetition rewards recognition. And what you see enough times, you stop questioning. This is why the children of God must be awake. We must be alert. We must not only pray for protection from the enemy, but for perception of his patterns. Because when you lose sensitivity, you lose discernment. And when you lose discernment, deception becomes desirable. Let this be the season where God restores your sensitivity, where you ask him to disturb you again, to break your heart for what breaks his, to make you aware of what's trying to sneak into your spirit. Because desensitization doesn't just happen out there, it happens in here. In the places we stop checking, in the thoughts we stop challenging, in the media we stop questioning. And if we don't catch it early, we accept it eventually. We often think that when our fire for God fades, it's because our faith has failed. But that's not always the truth. There are many who still believe in God, still attend church, still sing the songs, and yet feel numb inside. They know the words but can't feel the weight. They carry the language but lack the presence. This isn't a loss of faith, it's a loss of focus. Spiritual dullness creeps in when our attention is divided, when our hearts are overwhelmed with everything but the voice of God. Focus is the fuel of spiritual vitality. When your mind is consumed by distractions, your spirit loses its edge. You start coasting, you start operating on autopilot, and slowly you start mistaking activity for intimacy. But busyness does not equal closeness. You can serve and still be spiritually dry. You can post scriptures and still be empty. You can quote verses and still be dull in the spirit. Why? Because what once had your full attention, the presence of God, now has to compete with everything else. The enemy doesn't always need to attack you with pain. Sometimes all he needs is to keep you preoccupied. If he can keep you entertained, overcommitted, overstimulated, then he's already winning. Because your strength comes from the secret place. Your discernment comes from the stillness. Your power comes from proximity. And when your focus is fragmented, your connection becomes weak. The issue isn't that you don't believe, it's that you don't behold. You don't pause long enough to see. You don't sit long enough to hear. This is the trap of the time we're in. Distraction disguised as progress. We've been taught that movement equals growth. But spiritual growth isn't always seen in motion. Sometimes it's seen in stillness. It's in the quiet, surrender, the intentional tuning in, the focused pursuit of God without the noise of 1,000 other things competing for your attention. The dullness doesn't happen because you don't love God. It happens because you've stopped looking at him. You've stopped fixing your eyes. You've stopped prioritizing his presence. The danger of spiritual dullness is that it numbs your response. What used to make you fall on your face now barely makes you blink. What used to stir you now barely gets a nod. You're not rebellious, just distracted. You're not disconnected, just overloaded. And in that overload, you've lost the sensitivity to the whisper. But God doesn't scream. He still speaks in the whisper, in the gentle pull, in the quiet prompting. And if you're not focused, you'll miss it. Not because he isn't speaking, but because you're tuned into too many other frequencies. Paper. Focus is warfare in this generation. Focus is a radical act of faith. To turn down the volume of the world and tune in to heaven. To say no to noise, even if it's normal. To pull back from the scroll so you can stretch out in prayer. To cut away the clutter so you can hear him clearly again. Because when you lose your focus, you start depending on what you feel instead of what you know. You start walking by sight instead of faith, and slowly you drift. The Holy Spirit is drawing us back into alignment, back into clarity, back into vision. Not the kind that sees far, but the kind that sees him. This is a season to fix your gaze again, to clear out the distractions and return to the simplicity of knowing him. The world will always offer more things to look at, more things to chase, more things to do. But your spirit doesn't need more movement. It needs more focus. Because the dullness isn't from lack of faith. It's from everything that's pulling your eyes away from the one who gives you life. In a world addicted to speed, shortcuts, and ease, we started measuring value by how quickly something can be accessed, not how deeply it was formed. But kingdom truth doesn't operate in convenience. It requires conviction. And that's where the cost lies. Because choosing God's way will never be the easy way. It won't always be popular. It won't always feel good, but it will always preserve your purpose. We are living in a time where convenience is not just a lifestyle, it's a theology. We want answers without prayer. We want breakthroughs without process. We want influence without intimacy. And slowly, we start treating God like a vending machine, inserting minimal effort and expecting maximum return. But real conviction doesn't cater to your comfort. It challenges it. Conviction is what makes you stand when everything around you bows. Conviction is what keeps you aligned when culture tells you to adapt. Convenience tells you to go with the flow. Conviction tells you to go against the grain. Convenience says don't make it complicated, just blend in. Conviction says even if you stand alone, stay true. And here's the truth, most don't want to confront. If you always choose what's easy, you'll eventually surrender what's eternal. Because compromise rarely starts in the big things. It starts in the small allowances we make for the sake of comfort. Think about how many people are accepting things they once rejected. Not because they no longer believe in truth, but because it's inconvenient to defend it. Conviction is costly. It will cost you relationships. It will cost you opportunities. It will cost you applause. But the price of convenience is always greater. Because convenience asks you to lay down your discernment for the sake of peace. And that's not peace, that's passivity. Conviction requires you to confront what's trying to blend into your life unnoticed. It requires you to be uncomfortable, to say no when it would be easier to say yes, to walk away when it would be more beneficial to stay. Conviction doesn't just speak when it's convenient, it speaks when it's costly. And that's how you know it's from God. Because the flesh will always choose comfort, but the spirit chooses consecration. We have too many believers who want to carry a cross without ever being inconvenienced. But the cross is inconvenience. It is surrender. It is death to comfort. Jesus didn't take the convenient route to Calvary. He took the route of obedience, and he did it for us. So when we say we're following him, it means we are choosing the narrow path, the one that requires saying no to what's trending, what's accepted, what's applauded, and saying yes to what is holy, what is righteous, what is eternal. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the good things in life, but when comfort becomes your compass, you will miss the deeper things of God. Because his presence often meets you in the sacrifice. His voice often meets you in the stillness, in the detour, in the moments when you chose obedience over ease. And when you do, you find something far more powerful than convenience. You find purpose. You find peace. that doesn't come from having everything easy, but from knowing you're exactly where he's called you to be. The world will always offer a quicker route, a less complicated choice, a softer message. But child of God, we are not called to soften the truth, to make it more palatable. We are called to live the truth, even when it's unpopular, even when it costs us, even when it requires everything. Because while convenience gives you the illusion of gain, it's conviction that anchors you in the truth. It's conviction that protects you when deception comes dressed in opportunity. And it's conviction that will keep you standing when everything else fades away. One of the most dangerous weapons of the enemy isn't destruction, it's imitation. He knows how to mimic the movement of God. He knows how to craft what looks like destiny, what feels like purpose, what sounds like truth, but is infused with subtle deception. That's why discernment is not just a spiritual gift in this hour, it's a survival tool. Because the counterfeit isn't coming to scare you, it's coming to seduce you. It's coming to blend in with your prayers, your desires, even your God-given dreams. The enemy doesn't tempt you with what you don't want. He shows up with what looks exactly like what you prayed for, but it arrives too early, too easily, or too manipulated. The timing is off, the foundation is shaky, but the presentation is polished. And if your spirit isn't anchored, you'll find yourself calling something a blessing that heaven never sent. You'll confuse the counterfeit with the promise because it was wrapped in charisma, cloaked in success, or dressed in relevance. This is how Eve was deceived in the garden. The serpent didn't come with poison, he came with promise. He didn't say disobey God, he said you'll be like God. He offered something that sounded good, but it was void of obedience. And this is still the strategy. Take the edge off of sin, polish the surface, and present it as an upgrade. But anything that contradicts God's timing, God's voice, or God's character is not from him, no matter how good it looks. The counterfeit will always appeal to your impatience. It will offer the shortcut, the fast track, the applause. It will tell you, you can have it now. Why wait? Why suffer? Why stretch? But every promise from God requires process. And the counterfeit skips process. It bypasses pruning. It detours around the secret place and tries to deliver the crown without the cross. But a promise that didn't go through God's hands will always come with chains you didn't see at first. We must train our spirits to recognize not just the appearance of things, but the origin of them. Where did it come from? What is it producing in your soul? Is it pulling you closer to the voice of God or further into confusion? Because the enemy is subtle. He doesn't need to pull you into obvious rebellion. He just needs to get you a few degrees off course. And if you walk long enough in that direction, you'll end up far from the promise, even if you started close. This is why we cannot rely on our feelings alone. Feelings fluctuate, emotions change. What feels right can still be wrong. What feels good can still be toxic. The only secure ground is the word of God and the witness of his spirit. If it contradicts his word, it doesn't matter how right it feels. It's counterfeit. If it costs you your peace, your obedience, or your purity, it's counterfeit. If it asks you to compromise to keep it, it's not a blessing, it's bait. And hear this, the more you grow in God, the more refined the counterfeits will become. The enemy studies your preferences, he watches your desires, and then he crafts distractions that mirror your destiny. But that's why intimacy with God is not optional, it's essential. When you walk closely with him, your spirit gets trained. You start recognizing his sound, his rhythm, his fingerprints. You don't just look at the surface, you discern the source. God is not just trying to give you a promise. He's trying to prepare you for it. Because if you receive it before you're ready, what was meant to bless you can break you. And if you grab the counterfeit, it might satisfy you for a moment, but it will drain you in the long run. The enemy doesn't mind you being successful as long as you're successful in the wrong thing. Because what good is elevation if it's built on deception? There's a weight to your calling, and with that weight comes a responsibility to stand out, not to fit in. From the beginning, you were set apart. Not set aside, not excluded, but divinely marked, intentionally crafted, and spiritually positioned to carry light in the midst of darkness. And yet in today's culture, the pressure to blend in is louder than ever, to tone it down, to soften your voice, to shrink your convictions so you don't make anyone uncomfortable. But the truth is, comfort was never your assignment. Clarity was. You were not made to mirror the world's values, its trends, or its opinions. You were made to reflect heaven. But that reflection will always clash with a system that is broken. A system that celebrates compromise and mocks holiness. A system that rewards popularity over purity, relevance over righteousness. And here's the tension. The more the world decays, the more it demands that believers dilute themselves in the name of love, unity, or tolerance. But love without truth is not love. Unity without integrity is not unity. And peace at the expense of obedience is just a pretty prison. When Jesus walked the earth, he wasn't accepted. He was opposed. He didn't blend in. He disrupted. He didn't fit into the religious or cultural mold. He shattered it. And he told us plainly, if the world hates you, remember it hated me first. That wasn't a warning to be scared. It was a confirmation that your difference is evidence of your assignment. The enemy would love for you to be quiet, to settle, to be reasonable. Because as long as you blend in, your impact is neutralized. The world doesn't need another believer who mimics its language. It needs a believer who is bold enough to speak heaven's language in a world that's lost its ear for truth. We don't need more influencers. We need more intercessors. We don't need more trends. We need more truth tellers. This world is broken. Systems are collapsing. Truth is being distorted. And now, more than ever, God is raising a remnant who are unapologetically aligned with him. A people who don't need applause to stay obedient. A people who don't need a platform to be powerful. A people who don't dress their convictions in compromise. Standing out will cost you. You'll feel lonely sometimes. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be labeled as too much, too deep, or too spiritual. But being misunderstood is often the proof that you are being obedient. Noah was mocked until the rain came. Daniel was thrown in a den for refusing to kneel. Esther risked her life to speak truth in the palace. You are in good company when your difference draws fire. Because fire doesn't destroy the called, it proves them. God did not call you to fit in with dysfunction. He called you to confront it. Not with arrogance, not with judgment, but with unshakable truth. With a posture of love and a backbone of conviction. He placed you in that family, in that job, in that city, in that school. Not so you could go unnoticed, but so you could be a living interruption to the enemy's agenda. A reminder that